Okay, so this algebra review is about solving proportions, and proportions are defined as two ratios set equal to each other. Well, a ratio is a fraction, so when you have two fractions set equal to each other, it becomes an equation you can solve. And we have something called the cross product that allows us to test if a proportion is true. So the cross product is when you cross multiply the values, b times c is equal to a times d, and we can test a simple proportion here. 1/2 is equal to 4 over 8. 4 over 8 reduces to 1/2, but if we cross multiply, we get 2 times 4 is equal to 1 times 8, and we say, yes, that's true. And that's what makes it a proportion. If it wasn't true, it would not be a proportion. And then you can replace these with variables. And you say when you cross multiply, you would get 8x is equal to 2 times 4. And you would get that x is equal to 1, which we knew from our example before we put the x there. So that's what a proportion is. Two fractions set equal, we can cross multiply to solve, and we can cross multiply to test if our solution is correct. So here we have two examples that we can work out. If we look at example 1, when we cross multiply, we'll get 20 times x is equal to 4 times 15. 20x is equal to 60. X is equal to 3. And we can say, well, we can test this by saying 3 over 4 is equal to 15 over 20. And if we do 3 times 20, we get 60. And if we do 4 times 15, we get 60. And we say, yes, our answer is correct. So let's do this again. We just move the x from the numerator of our fraction to the denominator, but it doesn't matter. When we cross multiply, we still get 15 times x. And then we get 20 times 18. And that gives us 15x is equal to 360, or that x is equal to 360 divided by 15 is 2. 2 times 15 is 30. 4. We get 24. And again, you can plug this in to the proportion and say, well, 15 over 18 is equal to 20 over 24. And if I do 15 times 24, that gives me 360, and 18 times 20 gives me 360. So the cross products are equal. That helps me verify that my answer, x equals 24, is correct. So here are two problems for you to try on your own. Pause the video here, work them out, then unpause to check your answers. So for number 3, you should have had 15 times 12 is equal to 60x. 15 times 12 is 180. Divide both sides by 60, and you should get x equals 3. For problem number 4, you should have 4 times 180 is equal to 30x. 4 times 180 gives you 720. Divide both sides by 30, and you get that x is equal to 24. So now in these next examples, we see that our proportions have more than just an x, but has an algebraic expression in the fraction. And the same thing happens. We just want to make sure that when we cross multiply that we do use parentheses. So 40 times 2x minus 1 is equal to 5 times 56. And we say, well, let's distribute that 40 through the parentheses. So we get 80x minus 40 is equal to 280. Now you want to add 40 to both sides. And you have 80x is equal to 320, or that x is equal to 4. Now for problem number 6, notice that when we cross multiply, we are going to get an algebraic expression with an x squared term. When we distribute, we get x squared minus 2x equals 35. And in our notes for solving quadratic equations, we said that you always must get 0 on one side of a quadratic equation. And again, when we say quadratic, that means we have an x squared term. That's what quadratic means. So subtract 35 from both sides. We see that we have an x squared on the left, we have an x on the left, and 35 is a constant, so we're going to get a 3-term polynomial because there are no like terms that can be combined. And this is the easy case because x squared has a coefficient of 1, so we know we have 2 parentheses with an x times x at the front, because that's the only way we can get x squared. And then 2 numbers that multiply to equal negative 35, but add up to equal negative 2 would be negative 7 and positive 5. And when we have 2 sets of parentheses that multiply and equal 0, that means that either x minus 7 is equal to 0 or x plus 5 is equal to 0. And that would give us x is equal to 7 or x is equal to negative 5. So when x equals 7, our proportion would be 7 over 7 equals 5 over 7 minus 2, which 5 over 7 minus 2 is 5, so 7 over 7 equals 5 over 5. And we say, yes, that's true, that's good. When x is equal to negative 5, we get negative 5 over 7 equals 5 over negative 5 minus 2. So that's negative 5 over 7 equals 5 over negative 7. And once again, when you cross multiply, you get a true result. So both answers were good. You always have to check that when you have quadratics in your proportions. Okay, so here's the next problems. Try these out. The one on the left you can solve without factoring. The one on the right you'll need to solve with factoring. Once you're done, hit play to check your answers. So number 7, we get 24 times x plus 3 equals 6 times 5x plus 8. And when we distribute through the parentheses, we get 24x plus 72 is equal to 30x plus 48. And when we subtract 24x from both sides, we have 72 equals 6x plus 48. And then subtract 48 from both sides. And we have 24 is equal to 6x, and that x is equal to 4. You can plug it in to check, and when you check, you'll find that it does satisfy the proportion. Now for number 8, when we cross multiply, we get x times x plus 5 is equal to 3 times 8. That gives us x squared plus 5x equals 24. Because it is a quadratic, meaning it has an x squared, we need to get 0 on one side. So we're going to subtract 24 from both sides of the equation. That gives us x squared plus 5x minus 24 equals 0. And this is the easy case. X squared has a coefficient of 1, so we make our 2 parentheses with x in front because x times x gives us x squared. What 2 numbers multiply to equal negative 24 but add up to positive 5? That would be a plus 8 and a minus 3. And then we set each factor equal to 0. And we solve for x. And you can check these in the proportion. Both of them will work, so both answers are valid, and they will give you true statements. So this is the end of the video. Go back, watch it, take notes, do your practice, and come to class with questions.